It's almost 5 o'clock and we would start the meeting at 5. And now I'd like to welcome everybody to the Public Information Open House meeting for the proposed zoning bylaw amendment application for 0-15850 Repstock Road. I'm Amenity Senior Development Planner with the town and the file lead on this application. The applicant is requesting an amendment to the town's zoning bylaw to allow the construction of a 154 unit stacked townhouse development. I'm joined today by Mackenzie Sissy, planning technician with the town, owner of the subject property, and their planning consultant, Mary Lou Tanner from Niagara Planning Group. I would like to mention that this is an opportunity for the area residents to know about the proposal, ask questions. Any concerns and questions raised tonight will be included in Council's information report, which will be presented to Council at a later date. I would like to provide a quick overview regarding tonight's meeting. We'll start the meeting by Ms. Tanner making a presentation regarding the development proposal. Following that, we'll go to the area residents for their questions. As we have large number of residents in attendance, we would like to hear from all of them. We would be allocating 5 minutes to each resident to ask questions. If in the end we have time left, we will be able to go back to the residents for a second round of questions. I would now like to turn it over to Mary Lou to introduce her team and make the presentation.
Thank you very much, Anamika. Joining me is Ria Davis from our firm, as well as Pat Aiello, who is the project architect. Ria Davis is going to share our slide presentation, and I'll give you the overview of the proposed development. So this introductory slide gives you an image of what the stacked townhouse model looks like. Could we go to the next slide, please? I'm sure as you live in the area, you are familiar with where the property is located, but just to orient everyone so we know what we're looking at when we see the drawings that I'm going to walk you through. Ridge Road South is on the right-hand side of the image, and Rebstock Road runs east-west on the bottom. Our lands are shown in the middle and have access on Rebstock Road. On the north and west sides, we're surrounded by what we call institutional uses, which are the arena and the park. And then we've highlighted where our neighbors are, the lower density residential uses and the single family homes that adjoin our property. The property does have frontage on Rebstock Road. You can see that throat that goes down to Rebstock Road. It is 27.6 meters in width. And the total area of the property is just over 15,000 square meters. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this is our proposed development. And again, to orient you, Rebstock Road is at the bottom of the slide, and you can see that throat access that I spoke to earlier. This project consists of what we call back-to-back townhouses, and I'll show you what that looks like in terms of the housing model itself in a moment. But just to orient you to our proposal, we have 4 blocks that are shown in gray with some yellow that go on the north property and on the west property. And they all have sidewalks that you can see that are in the light gray that provide people access to the units from the parking area. Those gray areas are 3.5 stories in height. The half story is a stairwell and what we call a mechanical penthouse, where mechanical equipment is kept. The yellow is a 2-story portion of the back-to-back townhouse units. And we've done the 2 stories because they adjoin neighbors to the east and to the south. And in the center, you see 2 blocks that are in orange. They are also back-to-back townhouse units. However, they are 3 stories in height. In addition to what we're showing in terms of the number of units, which is 154, we have 194 parking spaces on the site, as well as 20 bike parking spaces. And we've designed the project to ensure that we have an internal sidewalk system for people to be able to walk comfortably from the parking area to their particular unit. Other things that I want to flag for you and draw your attention to: in the northwest corner between blocks A and C, we have what we call the common amenity area. We've taken the amenity area and amassed it in this corner so it adjoins the arena and the park and provides a larger area for future residents. One of the things that we think is also important is because we have units with front doors facing the park and the arena, as well as sidewalks, we're providing what we call passive surveillance, or people being able to look out over the park. And this just provides an approach to safety and security for all. And we also provide a connection to the sidewalk on Rebstock Road, as you can see on that piece I called the throat on the left-hand side. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier about sharing some information about what this housing model looks like. So on the left-hand side is an illustration of the housing type. And you can see that each townhouse has 3 units. There's what we call a partially below grade unit, a main floor unit, and an upper level unit. And you can see in the drawing with the pink on the left-hand side that there is a section in the middle at the top, and that is what I refer to as the mechanical penthouse stairwell, and that's the half story. On the right-hand side, you can see how we approach the design with tapering the buildings so that you're not looking at a 3.5-story building that goes just up in front of you as a pedestrian standing in front of it, and you're not looking at a sheer wall, but it is stepped back to take away the feeling of being in front of a 3.5-story building. We are proposing 103 units per hectare. And for context, the town of Fort Erie has just completed the Crystal Beach secondary plan, and this site is recommended by the town and has been adopted by council to be 100 units per hectare. So we are somewhat over, but only in a very minor 3% area. The proposed housing model, as I mentioned, is 3.5 stories with some 2-story portions, and those center blocks are 3 stories in height. Could I have the next slide, please? This is just an image of what the units will look like, and you can see the step back that I talked about and the tapering up to the top, and see the mechanical penthouse. Next slide, please. And this is another image of those center units that you can see that are 3 stories in height. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this slide is a bit busy, and I'm going to take a bit of time to walk you through it just to explain the zoning bylaw amendment that we have proposed. So let me start in the upper right-hand corner. The rear yard provision is 4.5 meters, and the town requires 6 meters. We are required to measure at the narrowest point of where the rear yard is, and you can see that it is at the end of that black arrow. You can also pick up that the property is not square and actually angles towards that black arrow. If you look at where the yellow blocks are shown, the distance between those units and the property line is 8.5 meters. So this is a situation where we don't have a square property, so we measure at the narrowest, and it's 4.5 meters. Moving down on the right-hand side, the distance from dwellings to private streets and the parking areas, we're proposing 0.9 meters, and what is required is 1.5 meters. And this is to address providing those parallel parking spaces that you can see just to the left of Block E, and making sure there's a reasonable distance for grass and plants to grow. The landscaped area we're proposing is 35%, while the town requires 50%. And this is something that we are proposing because we are trying to balance providing on-site parking with providing landscaping. The required frontage, which is in the bottom right-hand corner of this slide, is 50 meters, and we are providing 27 meters. And that is simply the property configuration and the access to Rebstock Road. But that 27-meter frontage does provide us with the ability to provide landscaping, a driveway, rows of parking, and that sidewalk that I spoke about that provides people pedestrian access to Rebstock Road. In terms of the left-hand part of the slide, let me just share some information with you about the nature of the amendment. So we are proposing what's called a site-specific zone. So the zone would be crafted to implement the proposal that you have before you. The use would be stacked back-to-back townhouses, which is not permitted in the town zoning bylaw. The maximum building height is 3.5 stories. And as I mentioned earlier, the town has been working on the Crystal Beach secondary plan, and the proposed zoning for this site would be 3 stories in height. The density we are proposing, as I mentioned, is 103 units per hectare, and this Crystal Beach secondary plan recommends 100. We are proposing a parking rate of 1.25 spaces per unit, which is less than what the town requires. And I'll have more information on that in the next slide. There are some technical amendments that we also require. The maximum number of units in a row for a traditional townhouse is 8. Because this is a new model of housing, we are requesting that that provision not apply because of the back-to-back nature. The privacy area, we are also requesting not apply. The town requires 4.5 meters in depth. We've chosen to mass the privacy and amenity area in that northwest corner. And the landscape open space area in the front of a dwelling is to be 30%. We're requesting that not apply because this is a different model of housing, and we are providing connectivity from the parking area and providing buildings that are closer to the parking area with that sidewalk, as I mentioned earlier. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I spoke earlier about the parking spaces and that I'd share more information with you. We have completed a number of studies to support our application. We completed a traffic and transportation brief, and that was done by professional engineers who specialize in traffic studies. They looked at the traffic generated from the site and confirmed that the roads in the area, Rebstock and Ridge Road, as well as the intersection, Rebstock and Ridge, will perform satisfactorily, and there will be no changes in the operation. Operation is determined by a level of service that is calculated by the professional engineers, and there's no change in level of service. The site access is expected to operate well under the future scenario, and the access is appropriate. And the proposed parking rate is appropriate for the future development. In doing this traffic study, the engineers that completed it looked at a number of different developments of similar densities in similar communities and confirmed that not only the planned parking rate, but the actual experienced use of those sites in terms of parking was consistent with what we are recommending for this development. We have completed a municipal servicing report for sanitary and water mains, and this is getting additional work done through the town to support confirmation of the municipal services. But the recommendation from our engineers is that the services are available and that the site can be serviced. I want to spend a bit of time on stormwater because we did receive some comments about drainage from neighbors. We are proposing an underground tank to store the on-site stormwater so it drains slowly into the town system. In addition, in Ontario, we are required to retain the stormwater and manage our drainage on our site and not impact neighbors. And our proposed work and the grading plan does confirm that. We're required to complete an archaeological assessment because the town of Fort Erie has significant archaeological resources. None were found, and we have requested clearance through the provincial ministry that does so. Licensed professional archaeologists completed the study. Next slide, please. I want to spend a bit of time on the sun shadow analysis because this is an important assessment of the design of the site. So I'm going to share some information with you about how we approach these studies. So we know that the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And in the part of the world that we live in, the sun swings southward. So it rises in the east, swings southward, and sets in the west. When we analyze sun shadow impacts, we look at the winter, the 4 times of the year when the sun is changing. So March, June, September, and December. On the left-hand side, we've assessed the morning impact, and these impacts were assessed at 9 a.m. in the morning. So the sun will be in the east. And you can see that in the spring and the fall, which are the 2 left-hand drawings, there's a little bit of shade at 9 a.m. onto the park. In the summer, there is no impact onto the park. And in the winter, you can see that there is more impact. There's impact within our site, but also impact into the park and the arena site. When we assess if there is an impact that needs mitigation, typically we look at providing 9 hours of sunlight on public spaces, so sidewalks, as well as parks in the arena site. And our analysis confirms that it was 5 hours of sunlight. Our analysis confirms that we have 9 hours of sunlight. Let me now turn to the right-hand part of the slide. And this is shadow impacts on the residential properties facing Ridge Road. And this is an evening impact. And we assess the sun at 5 p.m. from the western view. And for the winter, we looked at 4 p.m. I think the other thing it's important to note, the winter impacts are the most because the sun is the lowest in the sky, so the shadows are longer. So you can see for the properties facing Ridge Road, when we look at spring and fall, there is somewhat of a shadow impact on a couple of properties. And this shadow impact would occur if there were 3 stories or 3.5 stories. In the summer, the impact is wholly contained within our site. And in the winter, you can see that the sun being low in the sky and the shadows the longest, that the impact is the greatest. This impact would occur whether there was 3 stories or 3.5 stories on the site. I think it's also important to share with you that to the greatest extent possible, we have pulled the proposed buildings away from the existing neighbors on Ridge Road and Rebstock Road, and we have lowered the heights adjacent to those neighbors to reduce both the visual impact, but also the sun shadow impact. Could I have the next slide, please? Within the province of Ontario, there are things that we as proponents in the town need to conform to. So we have assessed this proposed development against those requirements. The Provincial Policy Statement, or PPS, as well as the Provincial Growth Plan, the Regional Official Plan, and the Town of Fort Erie Official Plan. And our proposal is consistent with all of those and conforms to those. This is an area identified for intensification in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan, and we have designed the site to achieve those intensification goals of the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan. This is a medium density residential site in that plan, and we have provided a medium density residential proposal. This proposal creates new housing and contributes to a more diversified housing mix. This will be 1 to 3 bedroom units, and it will be an ownership model. The proposed use and scale respect the neighboring residential context in that this is a lower profile development in the medium density residential range, and it does largely conform to the height provisions that the town has identified in the Crystal Beach Secondary Plan and zoning bylaw. We've provided that connectivity through passive surveillance for the park, which will benefit park users, and we believe this represents good land use planning. That concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary Lou. So we could now go to the area residents, and if they have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and maybe Mackenzie can tell them how to go about that process.
Thanks, Anamika. So at this time, I'd like to invite any of our attendees in the virtual waiting room to ask a question or provide comments, and you can do so by raising your virtual hand. So for those joining by computer, laptop, or mobile device, you can do this by pressing the raise hand button. To do this, click on the icon labeled participants at the bottom center of your computer or phone screen. And at the bottom of the window, click the button labeled raise hand. And for anyone joining by telephone, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. And as mentioned, we are adhering to a 5-minute time frame for each speaker to ensure that everyone has an opportunity to participate this evening. And I do want to encourage everyone also to use the chat function through Zoom in the bottom center of your screen to ask any questions in writing, and we can certainly get to those or address them at a later time. So I do see a few individuals with their hands up, so I'll bring in Sharon first. Hi, Sharon, are you able to hear us?
I am. My question is about the fencing, because we are in the center of 145 Ridge Road of the development, and I want to know what the fencing is going to be along the back of our property.
Hi, Sharon. Thanks very much. It will be fenced. We have not done the fence detailed design. Is there a preference that you have?
Well, I want something that's going to give us privacy, because we're going to have the parking behind us. So, and are there going to be trees along the fence the way that it looks? Or are there not going to be any trees? Because my bedroom's in the back of the house. And we are concerned about noise level of 154 cars or 194 parking spaces.
Okay, so yes, the trees will be provided there, and there will be fencing. Typically, it's a solid board fence.
Okay, that's one of my questions. And as to the drainage, that was our other concern, because when that property was initially done years ago, when the Friendship Festival was here, Mr. McAfee put drainage in that whole set of property so that the horses didn't get their feet all wet. Now, what's going to happen with that? Because our properties were lakes when the rain came, till he put the drainage in. So that's our concern, is that after you've put in 154 units and parking and everything else, what is the problem? What can we look forward to in our backyards? And do we get any guarantee that if we flood, is anybody going to take care of it?
Thanks very much, Sharon. So we will be putting in an underground storage tank to take the stormwater and then release it slowly into the town storm sewer system. We are not under the rules of the game in Ontario, but in the town as well, require that we not flood our neighbors. So the town, we have prepared drainage plans, and through the town's review process, they will confirm that we are meeting those requirements.
Okay, so, and the roadway, how far is it from the back of my property?
I think we'd have to get that measured, and we can send it to Amenity and she can share it with you.
Because I think that was the problem on one of the distances. I think it was only 0.9 meters when it should be 1.5 meters.
That was from the units on a private road to the driveway, to the private drive. We will get that measured for you and send it to Amenity, who can share it with you.
Okay, I would much appreciate that. And what about additional parking? Where are those people going to be?
So the traffic analysis that we have done, the traffic engineers who did the work looked at the parking rate that we are proposing. They looked at similar developments in similar sized communities and what was planned in terms of the number of parking spaces. And then they went out and field verified how many of those parking spaces were being used. And they've confirmed that our rate of 1.25 for a development of this type is an appropriate parking rate. I think,
Okay.
Sorry, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. The intended market now is, those are purchases, those aren't rentals.
That's correct.
Am I correct? Okay, so, and I think that's about all my questions that I have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon, I just want to mention before we would get the next resident in, if the question has already been asked, I would recommend that the residents do not repeat the same questions. If you have any new questions, I would strongly encourage you to ask the new questions. Please do not repeat the same question. That way we can save time and more residents would be able to ask the questions. Thank you.
All right, so we will move on to our next attendee, James.
Hello.
Hi, James.
Hi. Yeah, my name is James McFarland. I live right beside the entrance to this in the notched out area on Rebstock Road. It'll be parking and then the waste management right behind my house. I've got a couple of questions for you. It seems like the parking numbers aren't really realistic. Your comparables are Oakville, Mississauga, Whitby, Pickering, and Ajax. As far as the number of cars, it looks like in the study that's on the Fort Erie website there. We don't have the infrastructure here. We've got one town transit that runs once an hour past the front of my house here, and that's going away. I don't think the numbers are realistic as far as what you're talking about for parking for 194 parking spots. Looking at the number of 2-bedroom and 3-bedroom apartments there, where will the excess parking go? I think it's going to wind up right in front of my house on Rebstock Road. I don't think these numbers are correct.
Thanks, James. The traffic engineers who did the analysis have confirmed that the numbers are correct. I can share with you that in communities across Niagara where we do work, those numbers are accepted for this type of proposal.
Okay, I was just looking at one of the numbers on there. It says that you're planning for 60 trips in and out in the morning and 74 trips in and out in the afternoon. I don't understand how you have 194 parking spots and you're saying that there's only this many trips that are going to be in and out. I don't know what you're comparing it to.
So,
Like it's under reported here.
yes. So the traffic engineers who did the study, they used the Institute of Traffic Engineers traffic manual that gives trip generation in the morning and the evening based on the type of land use. So in this case, the housing and the stacked townhouses. And that standard is developed across North America. So across all different types of cities and addressing different types of land uses. So it's used for commercial, residential, institutional, schools, areas of employment as well.
Okay, so, okay, I guess my other question would be, you didn't really answer my question. I don't know where the extra parking is going to go. I know it's going to go out on the street in front of here, but I guess if the frontage required is 50 meters, how are you asking for 27? That seems like quite a big variance there for what is required versus what you're looking for.
The property only has 27 meters of frontage on Rebstock. And if we had 50 meters, we would provide 50 meters, but we don't. It's an odd configuration of a property. And so we're requesting a variance because of the circumstances of the property ownership. In terms of your question, we don't believe there's going to be overflow parking. The engineering study we had done confirms that the parking rate is appropriate.
Okay, it just seems like there's a lot of variances here. Instead of building to the property, you're trying to jam something that's too big into a small property with lots of variances, I guess is what I'm getting at. It just seems excessive to me. That's all the questions that I had at this point.
Thank you, James.
Okay, so I'll bring in our next attendee. Hi, are you able to hear us? Hi, Leslie. Are you able to hear us? I know I had just answered one of your questions in the chat. Oh, I'll ask you to mute yourself. There should be a button in the bottom left-hand corner.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yes, we can.
Perfect. Thank you so much. My first question is the intensification of the Crystal Beach secondary plan. I just wondered, Mary Lou, if you could just clarify that a little bit.
Certainly. I apologize, my grass is being cut. So if you hear a lawnmower in the background, that's exactly what it is. So the town of Fort Erie has been preparing a Crystal Beach secondary plan for the entire Crystal Beach community. And that plan, which is an amendment to the town's official plan, as well as the zoning bylaw to implement that secondary plan, were approved by Fort Erie Council some weeks ago, last month in September. And the secondary plan designates our site as medium density residential. So our neighbors would be designated low density residential. And the density proposed, adopted by council, is 100 units per hectare for the medium density site, and which is us. And our proposal is 103 units per hectare.
Okay. My question is, now you would like to not apply the current restrictions on units, number of units, privacy around the complex, and the landscaping around the complex. So you don't want those factors to apply to your site plan. I think my concern as a resident on the street and in the community would be that those are, I think, three very key areas that you're looking to have not apply to your site. I just want to raise that concern. I don't know that anything can be changed, with the current proposal that you have. So I guess my question is, how might our town council, our planning committee, and our community potentially amend what you're proposing so that it fits in, as James had said, to the actual land that's available to you without cramming in or changing or asking for an amendment so that these things don't apply to you? So that's my next question.
So I can provide you with some context. So the approach that we've taken in those amenity areas is to gather it all together and put it in the northwest corner. We were asked by the town staff to create a really good interface with the park. And so we did that in the northwest corner. And in doing so, we needed to make adjustments around the landscaping within the internal part of the site, not at the edges, but at the internal part of the site. In terms of that amenity area and the access area, this is a design decision that we made to provide sidewalk access to the units and make sure that there was a connectivity between the sidewalk and the unit. And in the back-to-back model, there's two sidewalks and then the units. And we chose to provide the sidewalk access to the units that face the arena site and the park. In terms of the decision by town council, that is up to council. I will say we're taking all the feedback seriously. We received a number of written comments that the town graciously shared with us over the past few days, and we thank everyone who sent those comments because we will work to address your feedback to the best of our ability.
Thank you. I do have, I think, I feel that our town has open spaces available. I know that this is the property owner, obviously owns this space, but I'm speaking to our town council to say, we have open space in the community where Crystal Beach Public School used to be, where Birdie Elementary School used to be, where your concept is beautiful. I looked at your renderings. I think that they're beautiful, but I do feel that you are potentially cramming this lovely space into our neighbors' backyards. It is creating a situation where there's increased traffic flow. The additional parking spaces, which I agree with Jamie, will be on the street. And we do have beautiful open space where it would be more reasonable for this type of build to be made. So I would like to obviously propose that to our town. My comment will be to the town to please amend the rendering so that whatever is built fits in with our community, doesn't take away from the green space, and is reasonable in that location. My next question would be, how many people are going to be in this facility, as far as how many bedrooms per unit, and how many people do you anticipate living at max capacity in this complex, please?
Mary Lou, I just wanted to let you know we are at the 5-minute mark, so maybe we can bring Leslie back in after you respond to her question.
Certainly. So Leslie, we'd have to do some calculations. It's based on unit size, and then it's called persons per unit. I don't have that in front of me. We will do that and share that with Anamika, and she can share it with you.
Okay, thank you.
And Leslie, if we do have time at the end after we've heard from other attendees, we can certainly bring you back in if you have any other questions.
Certainly, thanks.
So I'll be bringing in our next attendee, Spencer.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Spencer Mckay. I'm a certified planning technician in the city of Hamilton. I do want to start by saying I do work for a consulting firm. However, I'm not here in that capacity today. I'm here on behalf of Jim Bertulli, who is a close family friend and lives at 137 Ridge Road South. I was hoping I could share my screen today, Anamika and Mary, and go over. I did have a chance to digitize the concept plan and come up with some solutions while maintaining the yield that's been proposed. So just quickly, the concept plan I have before you today, it maintains the exact same lot coverage. It has the exact same amount of landscaped area, the same number of units, and parking spaces have been increased by 7 spaces. The main thing that I tried to achieve here with this concept plan was significantly increase the setbacks to the adjacent single detached dwellings that are both on Rebstock and Ridge Road. Along Ridge Road South, I've increased the setback of those dwellings from 6.5 meters to 11 meters. And then along Rebstock, I've increased it from, I believe it was 8.5 to almost 10.5. I think some thoughts should be given to this proposed layout, as it does have a much larger shared amenity space areas for places of gathering. I believe it has a better pedestrian connectivity throughout the site. But I think the biggest point, and when I was discussing with Mr. Bertulli, was maybe the addition of some 1 meter high berms that are at the back of these Rebstock homes and at the back of these Ridge Road North or Ridge Road South homes. I've allocated 6 to 7 meters there in spaces to allow for a 3-to-1 slope for the berm, and then simply increasing or substantially planting the top of those berms would help with any privacy issues that these neighbors are somewhat concerned with, and they won't also. The meter high berm will allow them not to be looking at cars all the time or having that light pollution trespass into their backyards. So I guess my question for Mary is this concept plan open for discussion? I didn't try to. It's more of a constructive criticism. I do agree with your thoughts that this is a medium density. The type of unit mix that you are proposing is adequate. The density is there. I do agree with how you're being sympathetic with the transitions in heights for blocks D and B. But I think there's just one little extra step that could be achieved here to make the surrounding neighbors slightly more maintaining their privacy.
Apologies, I'm on mute. Thanks you, Spencer. And just for clarity, I go by Mary Lou. Yes, if you could send this to Anamika and our team, we'd be happy to review it.
That is all I have, Anamika.
Thank you, Spencer. And if you could email that drawing to me, and I would forward that to Mary Lou.
No problem.
Thank you.
Okay, so we have 2 more attendees with their hands up as of now, so I'll be bringing in the next one.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. I think you confirmed one of my major questions, and that is the secondary plan has been already passed by council.
That's
When was
correct.
that done, please?
I believe it was September 18th.
Okay. How long has this planning been going on in process prior to the approval of that plan?
Several years.
Fascinating. Most of the neighbors here have had no clue that this was going on when we were looking at the secondary plan. So this is quite a surprise to a lot of us. I just want to, once I found out that this has already been approved and it's been going in process, I realized what's going on here. I only want to make the comment, I'm totally opposed to this whole idea. The secondary plan was not a good plan in the first place. It's totally changing the neighborhood. Several years ago, I tried to sell some property and I just wanted to put a townhouse on. And I was told absolutely not. You would be destroying the look and feel of the neighborhood. We have all these single family residences now, and you're going to go and cram another 100 odd units in here. So I will be approaching council for what it's worth to pass on that I am very displeased with this. I'm also even more displeased, as other people have said tonight, right off the bat, you're trying to get variances for a plan. You're trying to change setbacks, you're setting heights. It just really upsets me that, as you say, you've been planning this for years, and right off the bat, you're trying to get variances to a secondary plan that's just been started. So I don't have any other questions. This is like arguing about whether you're going to paint this place blue or green. It sounds like it's a fait accompli, but I do want on the record that I am really displeased with this whole process, and I will approach council for what that is worth. Anyway, thank you very much for letting me speak tonight.
Thank you, Jeff.
Okay, so we'll be moving on to our last speaker, Lori.
Hi, it's Lori. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi. I'm also a resident of Ridge Road South, and with my backyard abutting this property. So I do have a few questions. First being, I know it was brought up but not really answered, the light pollution. So there's going to have to be street lights in that, and most of our bedrooms, as Sharon had said, will be in the back of our properties abutting this property. So that is a major concern, along with the vehicle in the backyard. The units you've stated are ownership models. Is that correct, Mary Lou?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so do we know the demographics they'll be looking at for these? Because I did notice that 60 of the units are 1-bedroom units with a 400 square foot size. I myself know that to get mortgages on a property size of that small is very difficult. I work in the financial industry. So on average, it's 500 to 500 square feet being the smallest unit size. And in Toronto, most units are above the 500 square foot. So where did they come up with 400 square feet for a unit size? And what are the demographics that you're looking at marketing these properties to? Is it seniors? Is it low income? What type of demographics are you looking for?
So I can answer, but perhaps Pat can speak to the unit size issue. Pat is the architect from Organica. So the smaller units would be mostly for people entering the home ownership market as a purchaser. Given that they are partially below grade, probably not for seniors because there will be stairs involved to access the unit.
Yeah, just to touch up on that, Laurie. Yeah, the mix of sizing was decided with the client in terms of, the 400 square meters. I mean, sorry, square feet. But they do vary, and there's not that many units that are actually 400 square feet. They're a little bit larger than that, but there will be some that are going to be in around that ballpark.
Okay, because your actual, the plan or the document that was sent out to us had the 1-bedroom or bachelor units, 60 of them listed at 400 square feet. So that was my question on that. What about the light pollution?
If we receive approval for our official plan amendment and rezoning, we will need to go through subsequent processes with the town, one of which is site plan approval. And at that point, we will be providing what's called a photometric analysis. So it shows where the lighting will be, and it will show how we will address relationship to our neighbors. Typically, we don't spill light onto a neighbor's property.
Okay. One other concern that the property owner, most of the homeowners around here have been around for many years, and we all have good neighbors and a good relationship. We've had concerns with the property owner. This past summer, numerous residents have called in because that field was not cut. There were rodents back there and ticks. We weren't able to enjoy our backyards. So I get that a lot of comments have been, oh, being a good neighbor, and they would look out for the neighbors, but we haven't seen that with the owner of this property. And once again, it has only been cut once this past season and is grown again. So not sure if past performance is what we can expect in the future with this owner of the property. And it has been a bone of concern for many of the neighbors around here, not being able to enjoy our backyards as is at the present time. And when the construction starts, it being even harder to enjoy our backyards. It may also affect our property values in the area. We already have across the street, one of the open lots is now turning into a fire hall that we all weren't fully aware of until they started building, and we asked the contractors what was happening. And now we're going to have this behind us. So very concerned, like many of my neighbors, on how this is going to affect our property value overall.
So on the issue of grass cutting, we'll bring it to the owner's attention. So they're aware that there's a request from you, and I believe your co-neighbors that there be increased grass cutting. In terms of property values, typically studies have shown that there is not an impact on property values.
Thanks, Lori.
Mackenzie, we have a question in the chat box as well.
Yes, we do. So I will just move Lori back to the waiting room. And we have, it looks like 2 questions actually, because there was one that came first in the chat from Anita. She asked, where's all the snow going to be plowed to in the winter?
Thanks, Anita. So the snow will be plowed to the edge and limits of the parking area. It will also be, some will be in the amenity area, and if there is excess snow, it will be trucked off site.
Thanks, Mary Lou. And then we have one other question from Jeff. When is this likely to start and be finished?
Thanks, Jeff. So as I mentioned earlier, should we receive approval for the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw, we still have additional work to do with the town through what's called a site plan agreement, which is the very detailed engineering layout on the property, elevations, so showing what the buildings look like, as well as landscaping, and those need to be approved. That process typically will take 4 to 6 months once there's a decision to approve the development. So we would not likely see construction start until later next year. In terms of construction timeline, we'd need to speak with the client, and we can share that with Anamika, who can share it with you.
Thanks, Mary Lou. And Anamika, there was a question for you from Jeff as well. Is it likely that no parking would be implemented on rep stock?
That's correct. They would have to get permit in order to park on rep stock. And in the winter time, there is no parking permitted along rep stock.
And Anamika, we do have a question asking about where they can submit emails or concerns to the town. Will you be providing your email address, or did you want me to provide it in the chat?
You could provide that in the chat, but my email is included in the open house notice that was circulated. And you could email it to me. And again, Mackenzie would be providing that email in the chat box, and feel free to contact me by phone or email. And whatever information we receive through email, that would be included in the council package that would be submitted as part of the information report. And as of now, we don't have a date when the public meeting would be scheduled. Probably it will be in December, but we would, once that we have finalized the date for the public meeting, you would be receiving another notice for the public meeting.
So I did provide Anamika's email in the chat, so please feel free to jot that down. Anamika, I'm not seeing any other attendees with their hands raised. Oh, actually, we do have.
Yeah.
So we did have one from Margaret, and she raised her hand again, so I'll bring Margaret in. Margaret, I can see that your hand's raised. You should be getting a prompt inviting you to join as a panelist. So you should be able to allow yourself in.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I live on the west side of the park, and I just have some comments really, which I've already shared some of them with Anamika, but I have to agree that the some of the proposals, some of the factors, as James said, they don't seem to add up. But the thing that really kind of worries me a bit is, although these are scheduled to be owner-owned properties, we all know what happens with short-term rentals, that people, and particularly with these smaller units, we're likely to see a lot of these places becoming Airbnb units, which is obviously going to impact, because of the transient nature of the users, it's going to impact even more so the usage of the property, including the parking and the extra cars and so on. So I think that this particular development where it's proposed is completely unsuited for the neighborhood. And there are, as Leslie said, other areas of the Coosa Beach and Ridgeway area that could be intensified with much less impact on the existing owners and homes. The light pollution is definitely something that is a big concern. And although you're talking about addressing it down the road, I think that there's no way to avoid the fact that there will be street lights and there will be cars and et cetera, all impacting on the neighbors, particularly who have their backyards abutting the development. The other thing, I think that Jeff mentioned, the fact that the intensification of the secondary plan was not really, we were not given a lot of information about that in advance, and we were not given a much opportunity to make our comments about it. In fact, this development, when I got the notice about it, was the first time I knew that the plan was to intensify on the back side of the park. So we'll be speaking to the town council about the fact that there seemed to be a lack of communication and an opportunity for comment. The other thing, the comparables that were used for much of the planning are, larger cities, Toronto, Hamilton, Oakville, Mississauga, and so on. This development is just too big for the space. It's just too big. Like I said, there are lots of other places around, lots of other open spaces around where development of this size could have been appropriately and reasonably located, but not this space. It's simply not amenable to an intensification of this degree.
Thanks for your feedback, Margaret.
So we do have a few comments in the chat that I will note. So firstly, Anamika, someone is just asking if the public meeting will be held via Zoom.
Yes, the public meeting would be through Zoom. That's the information that we have available as of now. Maybe down the lane, if we have an updated information, I would let you know, but as of now, it would be through Zoom.
And we have someone asking when they can expect the next notification, I imagine, for the public meeting.
Like I said, we don't have the date yet. It would probably be in December, tentative, and you would be getting a notice 20 days prior to that public meeting. So probably in November, sometime in November, you would get the second notice for the public meeting. And there were a few people who had mentioned that they did not get a notice of the public meeting. And I would just like to mention the Planning Act requires us to notify the people within 120 meters of the subject property. And if somebody would like to be informed about this upcoming meeting, please send me an email and I would be happy to send a copy of the notice to them.
And someone is looking for clarification that the amendments will not be approved until another meeting will be held that they can attend. So the public meeting.
Yeah, so the first meeting, the public meeting would be an information meeting. That time council would not be making a decision. It would be just an information meeting. People can attend. That would be similar to this one. The people can attend the meeting, raise questions, ask questions, and that would be an information meeting. And following that, there would be a recommendation report that the staff would prepare. And at that time, we would be making our recommendation whether to approve the application, deny the application, and council would be making their decision at the recommendation meeting. So the next meeting that we would have would be an information meeting, not a recommendation report would be provided at that meeting.
We have someone asking or noting that we do have a lot of seniors who can't use Zoom. What about them?
They can watch the meeting on YouTube and they can send their comments to me. That's all I can mention. Unless we decide to go in person. And like I said, I don't have that information as of now.
And then we do have a comment from Jim. He notes that your parking estimates, he believes, are not correct and are based on larger communities with far more accessible means. And then we also have a question from Leslie that came in before, who is saying, is this development too far advanced and decided upon, or does the community still have a voice?
Oh, no, the community still has a voice. We're taking all your feedback very seriously.
Yeah, I would like to mention that no decision has been made. There were some emails that came that were asking the same questions. I would like to mention that no decision has been made as of yet. This is just an information meeting. We are collecting the information. Everything that we discussed would be included in the council report. Like I said, first meeting would be public meeting, no decision would be made, and it would be made at the recommendation report. That would be sometime in the new year. So the residents still have a lot of time to provide their input.
So that looks to be all of our questions, and we have no attendees with their hands up anymore, Anamika.
Thank you. Does Rocky have anything to say? His is ahead.
Yes, Anamika, thank you. Just to introduce myself, my name's Rocky Vaca. I'm with the law firm Sullivan Manny, and I'm the lawyer for the developer on this project. Just 3 points I wanted to make that came out of the discussion. First of all, there's a great deal of discussion of the number of variances that are being requested. I think the explanation why there's so many variances requested is because we are dealing with a comprehensive zoning bylaw that is quite old. And we are dealing with a brand new secondary plan, which is in compliance with current planning policies, which promote intensification and smart growth. Whereas the comprehensive zoning bylaw for the town dates back to a time period in which we did not have the intensification policies that we currently have. So I think that's a very seminal explanation as to why there are so many variances requested. If the town were to proceed with a new comprehensive zoning bylaw, I would expect that most of these variances wouldn't be applied for because the standards will have changed substantially. For instance, parking, the town requires 1.5 parking spaces per unit. I can advise you that most municipalities in Niagara are below 1.5. In particular, City of St. Catharines has been at 1.25 for quite some time. I do a lot of work in Niagara Falls, and although they're still at 1.5, they regularly approve projects at 1.25. And in fact, within the last 6 months, I've had projects approved at 1 parking space per unit. And again, I know there's concern about parking. It has been examined by an expert. I'm not a traffic transportation engineer. So, I mean, they are an expert and they are duty bound to be objective in their studies. Spencer Mckay provided a revised proposal, which we're going to give serious thought to. The only question I had, I'm not sure if Spencer's still on the line, is he was mentioning 1 meter high berms along the residential abutting properties. He may have missed the fact that there is going to be board-on-board fencing provided. So I don't see the purpose of the berms if there's going to be board-on-board fencing. And installing berms will only reduce the amount of space we have for storage of snow in the wintertime. But those are my comments. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Rocky. So I believe there are no other questions, and so we can conclude the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for attending this meeting. And like I said, once we have finalized the date for the public meeting, there would be another notice that would be sent out. The notice would also be published in the newspaper, Fort Erie Post newspaper. You would be notified. It would be on town's website. And if anybody would like to be notified of the upcoming meetings, please free to send me an email, call me, and I would make sure that you would get a copy of that notice. Thanks again for attending this meeting and have a good night.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you to town staff as well.
Thank you, Mary Lou.